Hello and welcome to helpyourmath.com. In this video, we are going to talk about odds. Whereas with probability, we use the ratio of favorable outcomes to all possible outcomes, when writing the odds in favor of something, it is favorable outcomes to unfavorable outcomes. And actually with odds, we get two types. We can have odds in favor, which is the favorable thing that we want to have happen, expressed first, or we can have odds against, which is where we have the unfavorable outcomes listed first. Usually odds are represented with, we could either use a colon, which is this thing here. We can use the word to. We can even just use a fraction. So if we saw 1 to 2 written like that, that means, and if it just says odds, it is assumed to be odds in favor. So that means for every one favorable outcome, there are two unfavorable outcomes. One favorable outcome to two unfavorable outcomes. Just like probability figures, odds values can be simplified. Odds can be expressed as odds in favor or odds against. If it just says odds, then it's implied to be odds in favor. And if it's odds in favor, I think I mentioned, but we would do favorable outcomes to unfavorable outcomes. And if it's odds against, we would put the unfavorable outcomes first and the favorable outcomes second. Let's look at a bunch of examples. I always encourage you pause the video and see how you do. First up, we have 16 people on my subway car. 6 of them are wearing boots. Based on this information, what are the odds the next person who steps onto the subway will be wearing boots? So we're going to use this empirical probability here. The probability of someone wearing boots is 6 out of 16, 6 being our favorable outcomes. And then what we want to do is we want to figure out, well, how many unfavorable? That would be the complement, right? So if there's 6 who are, then 10 are not. And that would be the unfavorable in this case. The odds the next person who steps on the subway would be favorable to unfavorable. And then I do want to simplify. We can pretend this is just like a regular fraction. 6 and 10 have a common factor of 2. And we would say 3 to 5. So I give it 3 to 5 odds the next person who walks on the subway will be wearing boots. 5 states begin with the letter N. What are the odds if a state were to be chosen at random that it would begin with the letter N? In this case, the favorable outcome are those 5 states that start with the letter N. The unfavorable would be all of the other states. There are a total of 50 states, which means 45 of them do not start with the letter N. And if we're looking at odds, again, it doesn't specify, so we assume it's odds in favor. It would be 5 to 45, which we could simplify to 1 to 9. So there are 1 to 9 odds. We would randomly choose a state that begins with an N. How does this relate to probability, you ask? Great question. I like the way you're thinking. Well, because the favorable and unfavorable represent the entirety, if we add them up, that would tell us not necessarily the possible outcomes, but the simplified version. So if we added it up here, the probability of choosing a state that starts with the letter N would be 5 out of 50, and we could simplify that to 1 in 10. Looking at the simplified, that would be 1 favorable to all possible outcomes would be favorable plus unfavorable. 1 plus 9 is 10. Right? It all relates. Okay, there's a 60% chance of rain today. Actually, we're expecting a blizzard, so it's like 100%. But in this example, there's a 60% chance of rain today. What are the odds in favor of rain? What are the odds against? So finally, we see odds against. If there's a 60% chance, that would be 60 out of 100. This would be the probability. I want to simplify my probability. That would be 3 out of 5. Oh, that looks familiar. That's like the first one. All right, so this is favorable, and this is all, which means unfavorable would be all minus favorable. So there are 2 unfavorable outcomes in this scenario. Kind of weird when I'm talking about rain. But we would say the odds in favor, favorable is 2, to unfavorable is, favorable is 3, unfavorable is 2. The odds in favor are 3 to 2. So 3 to 2 odds it's going to rain today. The odds against, this is where we switch them. We put the unfavorables first to the favorables second. Unfavorable we said was 2 and favorable was 3. So the odds against rain today are 2 to 3. And lastly, the probability of winning $1 on a dollar scratch off is about 21%. Rewrite this as odds in favor. Probability, that would be 21 out of 100. This is my favorable, and this is all possible outcomes, right? So unfavorable would be all of the rest of the 100. 100 minus 21 would be 79. I'm looking for odds in favor. I'm being optimistic here. The odds in favor, I have 21 favorable to 79 unfavorable. Those would be my odds in favor of that scratch off. This has been a video on odds. Thank you for stopping by.